Hello, welcome back. I'm Ron Mullet. This video is going to be a little different than some of my other ones. A friend asked me if I could reproduce a table that he had that was built in the 1930s. Now this thing has 80 years of patina on it, so there's no way I can match the patina on it. But it's a mahogany table, it's made of veneer, so I made one to match. This is probably what it looked like when it was brand new. I used shop sawn veneer for the top, the apron, and the shelf. There are medallions on each corner that I reproduced from his that are exactly the same. There's small banding around the top and across the bottom of the apron, and there's a nice little detail down here on this bottom shelf that just adds a little bit of interest. It has a drawer, and the legs are tapered on 3 sides, which is a little unusual. So if you stick around, I'm going to show you how I built this. So let's get going. I just want to add one more thing. I'm going to show you how to make a very, very inexpensive vacuum press. I'm starting with this big mahogany board. It's 1.5 inches thick and about 15 inches wide. Beautiful board. Okay, I've got that big piece of mahogany cut down into 2 sections. The legs are going to be 1 3/8 inch square at the top, and then they'll taper. I've planed these down to 1 3/8, and then to get them square, I'll set them against my saw blade, slide my fence over until it just touches, and now when I run it through, these will be exactly square. The legs are all cut square to 1 3/8. Now I have to taper them down to a little over 5/8 of an inch square on 3 sides. The way I'm going to do that is with this jig I've made that runs through between the fence and the saw blade. I've cut dovetails, grooves in it, and these clamps have a dovetail hook on the bottom. I've clamped them down on the mark there and up here on the mark, and I want this flat spot to be 1.5 inches or 2.5 inches down. So now I'll just run this through and cut it on 3 different sides. I have to cut a notch on the top of the legs where they attach to the aprons. I'm going to make the first cut on the table saw, but I have to be careful and make sure that it sets on the square part at the top of the leg and not on the angle part where the leg is tapered. I'm going to remove the saw marks and any other defects on the legs with the scraper. The next step is to cut the groove for the lower shelf to go in. I've got the length marked down from the top, and to set that dimension, I've put a stop block in here so I can slide this in. Now that gives me my length measurement. The problem is, as you remember, this thing is flat on one side and tapered on the other 3. So I've got this in here, and it's not square to the blade at all. What I've done, I've taken a cut off when I tapered the legs, and I can put that in there, and then I'll slide the taper in there. As I do it, you'll see this leg come into square with the blade. So I keep sliding it in, and it gets closer and closer, and there's square right there. All right, let's talk about how I make my shop-made veneer. I'm starting with this 12-inch wide board, and I'll slice off just a little over 3/16 of an inch thick slices, and then I'll run those through the planer and end up with 1/8 of an inch thick. These are the 4 boards I just cut the veneer. They'll be laid out like this. But what I need to do is get these edges completely straight so I have a nice tight seam across there. I'll take all 4 pieces and put them in my vise. And then I'll take some tape. Flip it over and do the same thing to the other side. Now I've got a nice tight package that I can run through the table saw and true up this edge and true up this edge, and these 2 pieces on the end will keep them from coming apart. Now these edges are just perfect right across there. I just don't think I'm going to have to do any planing or sanding, and I think they'll glue together just like that. Put the tape off. Let's see how they work. Oh yeah, that's perfect. You can't even see the seam. Once those are glued together and this is sanded down, those seams will just disappear. I like that. Now I've got this side all taped together. Now put glue in the seams. Doesn't take much glue at all. If you put a lot of glue in, you just end up with glue squeeze out. So, wow, it put more than you need. It's hard to find the seams now, which is a good thing. Now then I'll put a piece of wood with a weight on here and wait till that glue dries. This is the top, this is the substrate. I'm using Titebond cold press veneer glue, and this is a roller. I buy them 9-inch rollers and then cut them in half. This is a roller for adhesives. I leave the substrate just about 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch wider all the way around than the veneer. That way I have a perfectly straight square edge. The bottom is going to be poplar. It's just some poplar veneer that I made. All right, let's go put it in the bag. When I veneer something to a substrate, I don't need a big expensive veneer bag and a high-dollar vacuum pump. What I use is a Home Depot purchase bag that you put clothes in and then suck the air out with your vacuum cleaner to store your clothes for long periods of time. It has an opening right here where I can put my shop vac. It has a one-way valve. It has a sliding closure on the end. Using my shop vac, it will suck this down so that it presses the veneer solidly onto the substrate. Then once I get the veneer package in there, I cover it with landscape material. It's very porous, and then when I put that on top of the veneer, that allows the air to be vacuumed out so that there's no air bubbles or anything. I've cut grooves in melamine boards and then put those in the bag. That'll help vacuum the air out underneath the veneer. The panel for the aprons, I sanded it, cut the edges all smooth. Now I need to cut it down to 2.5 inches. All of my aprons are cut to width now. Now I need to cut a very thin rabbet to put this inlay banding along the edge. This banding is only a 1/64 of an inch thick. and it's 3/16 of an inch wide. So this is going to have to be a really delicate cut. Groove is cut, banding is cut to length. Now it's time to glue it in. Stuff is so small and fragile, got to be careful with it. Now it's time to cut these to length. The table has 8 sides, so I'm going to have to cut 22.5-degree angles on all the corners. Before I glue the aprons up, I'm going to cut a groove so I can put a spline in these to make them much more secure. Now it's time to glue the aprons together. I've lined them up and put tape on the outside edge. I've got all the splines cut. Now I can't put the spline in and then close it up because the angle isn't right. So what I'll do is I close it up, and I'm using a square here to keep 2 sides of it perfectly square. And then I'll just slide the splines down in. There's glue in the spline joint, so that'll make it pretty tight. This is going to be the drawer end, so I won't glue this. I'm going to tape it, pull it down into this square, and that will lock everything in. Now just let that set. This table has a medallion on all 4 corners of it, and I've searched online to try to find something that's similar. I can't find a thing. So I've decided to try to make one myself. What I'm using, starting with, is it's called Amazing Mold Putty. It comes in 2 parts. You just scoop out what you need out of each of them. There's one. The second one, so those look about the same amount. And then you just start mushing them together. Now you have to keep some pressure between your 2 hands when you're doing this. That way it compresses it and it doesn't allow any of those wrinkles to last inside of it. So now I end up with a nice little round ball. Now I'm going to take this nice little round ball, start in the middle, and I'm just going to slowly press it down over the entire medallion. So it's going to let that set for a while and see what happens. All right, this has been on for about 30 minutes. Let's take it off and see what we've got here. It went on as putty. Now it turned into like a silicone rubber. And look what we've got. Perfect imprint. I like that. Now I'm going to fill this mold up with plaster of Paris. It calls for 2 parts of powder and 1 part of water. And you need to put it in slowly and let it dissolve as you put it in, rather than putting it in and stirring it right away, because you get lumps that way. All right, I've got it all stirred up, and what I'm going to do now is pour some, this is just Elmer's white glue. Pour some Elmer's glue in there. Just helps make it a little bit stronger. Now we'll see what happens when we pour it in here. We've got to pour it in slowly. Get it all the way out to the corners. And I'm just going to tap it a little bit like that. What that will also do is it'll bring any bubbles, air bubbles that are down in there. You can see there's a couple right there. It'll bring any air bubbles to the top. Okay, the plaster of Paris is dried. Now then, let's take this out and see what happens. Oh my, yeah, that is nice. I like that. Now I got to figure out a way to make it look like 80-year-old antique brass. Since there's some underlying black tones on the original, I'm just going to rattle can of flat black paint and spray it. Now I need to make it look antique. What I've done, I went to Michael's and I found some brushed metal. This is bronze brucé. It's acrylic paint, and what I do is I just take and put a glob out on the table. I've taken an old t-shirt, cut it up into just this really small little piece of wiping, and I'm just going to start brushing this on just to kind of highlight around Okay, so I think I'm gonna leave that like it is. I can always add a little bit later. I'm going to cut some edge banding off of this maple board for the top. And I need it to be 3/16 of an inch thick. What I've made is a little jig here. This fits in the miter slot. And in here I have a stove bolt that I've flattened the end off, and I've got a lock washer on it so I can tighten that down. What I'll do is I'll run that up beside the blade, and I've got a 3/16 inch gauge. I'll set that between the bolt and the tooth of the blade. Then I'll bring my board in and slide the fence in until it just touches. Lock the fence down, take this out. And I've got a 3/16 inch thick strip. Okay, the maple strips are all cut, sanded. Now I need to cut a 3/16 inch square rabbet around this top edge so I can cut these down and put them into that groove. Now I need to cut the maple strips to fit down in there. So I've got all the maple strips cut, attached, and I planed them down smooth and then sanded them. And so I think that's going to work just fine. Everything is sanded to 220. I've gone over it with a tack rag, and now it's ready for finish. All right, now I'm going to start finishing. I'm going to finish all the pieces before I assemble the table. I'm using Minwax Wipe-On Poly. With the first coat, I really flood the surface because I want it to soak into all the wood fibers. After the first coat has dried, I use 400 grit paper and just go over very lightly just to knock the nibs off. Now with the second coat, I'm going to be a little more deliberate in applying this rather than just slopping it on. So this coat is going to be a little bit more restrained. I ended up applying 4 coats. Okay, now it's time for some assembly. I'm assembling this upside down. It's not really complicated, but I've got to go about it a certain way. I want to start with this leg back here in the back corner first. And I want to put this one in secure. These two on this side, I'm going to leave those a little bit loose. The reason I want to leave them loose is I have to get this shelf in there. The nice thing about pre-finishing all of these parts is that any kind of glue squeeze out will be pretty easy to clean up. Now what I want to do is I want to put this one in first, and then slowly, I'm going to move my head a little bit, slowly roll this one back in there. Oh, come on, cooperate. Get in there. And then slide this one in. Now then I'll tighten up the bottom of the legs, and then the last one I'll be able to put in quite easily. What's left is to put the drawer slides in here, and also then I'll mount the top. All right, the glue is dry on the legs, the bottom shelf. Turned out pretty sturdy. Now it's time to attach the top. I'm going to attach it with these figure-8 brackets. I've already got them mounted to the frame, and the holes are drilled, so now it's basically just line all the holes up. I run screws in there. You don't need to watch me run screws. I'll be right back. I hope this video inspired you to make a table of your own. I've got lots of other woodworking videos on my channel, so please check them out.